Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once more to our channel, The New Shooter. I'm your host. My name is Tsepo. Now today we are doing a continuation of the solo podcast. If you watched our last video, this one right here, we are talking about the 308 and why through that podcast we discussed how the 308 or the .308 Winchester is the best cartridge for a new shooter, and we're talking about the 30 calibers. All right, now if you remember also on that very same podcast that we did, right here I posted a picture showing the 30 calibers that are most popular, starting with the 308, the 30-06 Springfield, the 300 Winchester Magnum, and the 300 PRC. But on the right of those there was another odd character, 6.5 Creedmor. Now the reason why we did that because once you start talking about rifle cartridges, you cannot have a honest discussion about rifles without discussing the 6.5 Creedmor. It is a hot topic, so why not? So I put it up there as a precursor to what we're going to be talking about today, because I knew that somebody somehow will comment about the 6.5 Creedmor. So today we are going to discuss the 6.5 Creedmor. Is the 6.5 Creedmor better than a 308? Now remember, we talked about a couple of pointers that we need to look at before we decide if a cartridge is better than another. And the things that we're supposed to be looking at, those factors, we are going to be discussing today, and we are going to take all of those factors into consideration to decide if the 6.5 Creedmor is better than a 308. Because overall what we discussed last week is that out of all the 30 calibers, the 308 Winchester came out tops and checked all the tick boxes that are important to make it an overall cartridge. Whether you want to go hunting, whether you want to go into sports, or just going to the range and having fun and drinking. So today we are going to be discussing about the 6.5 Creedmor. Can it beat the .308 Winchester when looking through all those factors that we need to consider? Without getting any further ado, let's get to it. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Now let's get to it. The 6.5 Creedmor, 308 Winchester, which one is better? So when people or somebody decide to buy a rifle, we talked about choosing a rifle is not really choosing a rifle, but it's actually choosing a cartridge. So the factors that you need to consider when choosing a cartridge, because that's what your rifle will be shooting, depending on what your rifle is chambered in, based on what cartridge you want to use for whatever purpose you have. So let's get to it. We talked about factors that we need to consider. Factor number 1, ballistics, effective range, recoil, availability of ammo, cost, efficiency, and versatility. Alright, so we established last week the effective range of a 308. We established that it is less recoiling than the other 30 calibers, starting with the 30-06 Springfield. It just increases exponentially as it goes. Alright, and we talked about ammo availability. Now it is known that the 308 Winchester, it is the most available ammo It is almost impossible to go to a gun shop and not find any type of rendering of a 308 Winchester caliber ammo at any shop, anytime. And it is the most cost-effective ammo you can buy. We established that. We established that the 308 Winchester is the most efficient because it is an upgrade of the 30-06. Remember that. We had a 30-06 and the engineers at the time decided we should make this thing more efficient. Less weight, basically doing more for less. And they came up with the 308 Winchester. Versatility, what is it that you can use it for? We established that the 308 Winchester, you can use it for hunting, you can use it for sports, or you can just go to the range and have fun and not be able to hurt your bank or yourself with the recoil. We established that. And we talked about the actual hardware, which is the actual rifle itself. How you set it up is how you're going to be able to use it, which is most important. Sharp. So now we're not going to talk about the hardware, all right, that much. We're going to concentrate now on the cartridge because that's what is most important. So with the 6.5 Creedmor, all right, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, let us first discuss this thing that we said we're not going to discuss, but we're going to have to discuss it now because there's a point that I want to make before we go ahead. Okay, so all things equal, okay, .308 Winchester, 6.5 Creedmor, both these rifles are short actions, meaning this portion here, short action. It's not a long action like the 30-06 or the 300 Winchester Magnum or the 300 PRC. Short action, both of them, right? You'll find out that they have a lot of similarities. But now, remember when we talked about this .308 Winchester, it had two names. It had a military name and a civilian name. So on the civilian name, it is called a 308 Winchester. 308 is basically the 0.308 inches in diameter of what? The hole inside this pipe. All right, that is in inches. In millimeters, when you go to metric now, it is the 7.62 millimeter diameter. That's why in the military they call it 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO, because it's a NATO standard. Okay, you know those countries, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, they sort of blocked themselves into a defense pact, and they wanted to make sure that what they use, everybody else uses, so they can exchange ammo. So this is where this thing is coming from. Okay, so it is 7.62 by 51 NATO, military name of it. Civilian name 308 Winchester. But that 7.62 and the 308 refers to the size of the hole inside here, the size of the bore inside this pipe. Right, now we have a 6.5 millimeter Creedmor. Generally a civilian cartridge, designed for civilian, so it does not have that military name, so it remains 6.5 Creedmor. What is the 6.5? It is 6.5 millimeter Creedmor. The 6.5 is the size of the hole inside this pipe here, the size of the bore. So you have one being 7.2, the other one being 6.5. So the hole inside this pipe is bigger than the hole inside the pipe of a 6.5 Creedmor. Okay, that is about the only difference that you have on the hardware when it comes to the 6.308 and the 6.5. So we established that the bore is smaller. That will automatically mean that projectile that goes through that bore is also going to be smaller than the one that goes onto here. And how does that affect everything else? That's what we're going to be discussing now. So with a 6.5 Creedmor, we're going to be discussing the effective range of that cartridge. We're going to be discussing the recoil of that cartridge on the system. We're going to be discussing the availability of ammo of that caliber, the cost involved, the efficiency, and the versatility of that cartridge. Alright, so you'll not now be going to the hardware that much. We already dealt with that. Now we're gonna go into the effective range. Alright, I have some notes here. Okay, just to cut the long story short, we're going to be dealing with the Hornady ELD-X, and we're going to be dealing with the Berger Elite Hunter. Alright, so let's start with the Hornady ELD-X. 143 grains. Alright, so now with that, you're going to get a velocity of 2,700 feet per second out of this barrel. That's how fast that projectile will be coming out. It is going to have initial energy of 2,315 at a distance of 650 yards. You're going to have an energy output of 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. And with that, it has been established that you can be able to take mid-sized game animal ethically. Now, what about large game like your kudus and your eland? You can be able to only do that at 450 with an output energy of 1,400 foot-pounds of energy. Okay, beyond that, you will be entering now into, I think I'm taking a chance type of shots. But 450 and down, you will be able to have 1,400 foot-pounds of energy and more. Okay, so for small animals, it should be from 450 upwards up to 650, where your max output energy will be 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. Beyond that, it's a very dodgy, dangerous game right there. All right, and with the Berger Elite Hunter, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm not sure whether I'm talking about the burger that you eat or the burger of somebody who stays somewhere, but either way, it's burger to me. Burger. Weight 156 grain, Elite Hunter. Muzzle velocity 2,680 feet per second. Initial muzzle energy 2,488 foot-pounds of energy. Okay, so with that, you can be able to take medium game up to 700 yards with 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. So now the Berger cartridge, the Berger projectile can extend up to 700, but the Hornady one can only up to 650. All right, so at 500, that is your last point for the 1,400 foot-pounds of energy for a large game. So compared to the 308, let's see, my furthest range is 700 and my closest range is 500. The furthest being small game, the closest large game. 700, 500. That's for the 178 grain ELD-X for a .308 Winchester. Now for the 6.5 Creedmor, Berger 156 grain Elite Hunter, 700, 500. The Hornady ELD-X 650, 450. Now, it's getting interesting. There isn't really much difference between the 308 and the 6.5 Creedmor when it comes to ballistics and effective range of the cartridge itself. The numbers look the same. The only difference is the projectile for the 6.5 Creedmor is smaller in diameter as compared to the projectile for the 308 Winchester. Alright, but now, why is it that I'm getting similar performance? It is the speed at which the projectiles leave the barrel. It is faster on the 6.5 Creedmor, and the 178 grain ELD-X is a little bit slower out of the barrel of the 308, and because of that difference in speed, I'm getting similar energy outputs at 650, 700, 500, 500. So there isn't, it's just splitting hairs. There isn't really something to write home about. It all looks the same. Alright, now the question is, why would somebody go out and buy a .308 and not a 6.5 Creedmor? Or why would somebody go out and buy a 6.5 Creedmor and not .308 Winchester? Alright, we just talked about now the effective range, right? Ammo availability. Initially, when they started designing the 6.5 Creedmor, ammo was not that much available, but now it is practically neck and neck with the .308. Alright, so the cost consideration. .308 ammunition is by far cheaper than a 6.5 Creedmor ammo. It is cheaper to use 308 than a 6.5 Creedmor. Now put that into back of your mind somewhere. Cost. Alright, remember that. Efficiency. Alright, I'm gonna put a picture right here. It shows the two different cartridges. If you look at those cartridges right here, you'll realize that they are exactly the same. Same rim size, same case diameter, almost similar case capacity. In fact, the 6.5 Creedmor is using the .308 Winchester casing as a parent casing. It is exactly the same case, modified. Alright, and how did they modify the 6.5 Creedmor case from the .308? Between here, right, between here is the opening of the case. Alright, here is the angle that you find, like you get the case size, you get the neck, the angle, and the body of the cartridge, right, like that. So let's assume what I'm showing now is the .308 Winchester casing at the mouth. Okay, neck, shoulder, body. So what happened is the 6.5 Creedmor neck, because now it needs to accommodate a smaller diameter projectile. What you need to do now, make it smaller. You see what happens once you make it smaller, it actually now increases the angle here. Smaller mouth opening of the neck, increased angle. As a matter of fact, the neck angle, the shoulder angle for the .308 is 20 degrees, like this right here is 20 degrees, and the angle for the 6.5 Creedmor, it's much better, it's much larger. It's a 30-degree angle, so it's more pronounced. Okay, now the only thing that they did also with that cartridge is they made it just a hair shorter than the 308, because the 308 has got 56 grains of case capacity and the 6.5 Creedmor has got 52.5 grains of case capacity. So it's practically the same. Is it more efficient? You can say so, because it's got less. All right, so we'll give this score now to the 6.5 Creedmor because of less capacity of powder that you need to burn. It is more efficient. It makes use of that less powder, but giving out better results. Because we just looked at the ballistics before we started talking about this, it performs similar to the .308 with less, even if it's just by 2 grains, but it is a point nonetheless. All right, so how does the smaller neck and the sharper shoulder affect the projectile? All right, I'm gonna put a picture right there. This shows 2 syringes, same syringes. The other one has got a thinner needle, the other one has got a wider needle. Now at the back of those syringes, once you push the plunger, now assume that using the same amount of pressure for both, right? Once you push those syringes with the same amount of pressure at the same time, the water in the top syringe is going to go out much faster and quicker out of that needle, because there's enough opening for the water to go out, just splash out. All right, but now because the opening of the needle is much bigger, the water, once it goes out, it won't go that far. It will just go out and right there. Now the bottom syringe, same amount of pressure, thinner needle. You push that plunger, what you will realize, physics demands that the water will go further and take longer for the plunger to push out that water. So even with the rifle cartridges between 308 and 6.5 Creedmor, that is exactly the same thing that happens. Because the projectile is smaller, which is the water, it goes out further because of the smaller opening. All right, so if you have a look at, let's just go back a bit. These cartridges, they all use the same amount of pressure, 62,000 psi, same pressure. But because of the difference in size of the opening, something different happens inside here. Not in the syringe itself, because the pressure is the same, but what happens here is totally different because of the size of the bore or the opening inside here. Now let's assume that this is the needle, and inside here is the thickness or the thinness of the hole inside. The thicker the hole, the water just goes boop. The thinner the hole, the water just goes further. So what happens inside here? Higher pressure, pushing that thing out. Even though in the cartridge is the same, but the pressure in the needle here is not the same as the pressure inside the chamber. That is just plain physics. This is how now the 6.5 Creedmor becomes more efficient when it comes to distance. All right, it becomes efficient when it comes to distance. But now the catch is, because the projectile is smaller, it travels further, it will not have the same amount of tissue. Let's say you're hunting, right? It will not have the same amount of tissue damage as compared to the .308. Why? Because of the diameter. Remember, we talked about how at 1,600 feet per second impact, the bullet functions. That's the last lowest speed that a bullet can function. So when the bullet hits a target at that speed, it starts to expand. Now with the 308 Winchester, you start your expansion at 7.62 millimeter. Goes broader than that. With a 6.5 Creedmor, you start your expansion at 6.5 millimeter. You see the difference? So because of that difference, this cartridge will be much more lethally effective on impact than the 6.5 Creedmor. That is just physics. Alright, so when it comes to that, we would say that .308 will now have the ups on the 6.5 Creedmor. Alright, so that's where now you have to consider choosing the appropriate type of ammo. Software. Remember we talked about software and hardware. You need to be careful how you choose your software. That is why I was referring to the cream of the crop when it comes to projectile selection, which is the ELD-X 143 grain and the Berger 156 grain. Those are the most effective for the 6.5 Creedmor, and for the 308 178 grain ELD-X, the most effective. You get the most done with that than with by any other projectile. Now that is the subjective truth from me, because that's what I've tested. Some other people might have subjective truth for them, not objective, subjective. Okay, you have to test it out to find out, does this work for me? All right, but for me subjectively, 178 grain for the 308, 143 grain for the for the 6.5 Creedmor, and up there 156 grain Elite Hunter from Berger. Versatility. What can you use, because we talked about efficiency now, what can you use the 6.5 Creedmor for? This is a telltale right here. The syringes. High velocity. That means the 6.5 Creedmor does sports better than it does hunting. Doesn't mean it cannot do hunting, just that it does sports better. Remember we're talking about the jack of all trades, better than the master of one. This is what the 6.5 Creedmor excels in. Shooting further, faster, sports. Okay, but now the the results of the hunting part, it shows that it can perform just the same as the 308 within managed distances. And the 308, it shows it will do hunting better than it does sports. It does not mean it cannot do sports. It's just that it does hunting better than sports. Remember we talked about jack of all trades, better than the master of one. This is where the 308 excel in. Hunting better than sports. And the bottom syringe shows us this is where the 6.5 Creedmor excel in. Sports better than hunting. So it's really splitting hairs, right? It is really splitting hairs. So overall, it seems as if it now becomes a very hard choice to decide between the 6.5 Creedmor and the .308 Winchester, because you win one, you lose one, you lose one, you win one. So either way, you cannot have them all, because it is a jack of all trades. All right, doesn't do everything all at once or better than the other, but it just does what it's designed to do, being a jack of all trades, being better than the master of one. Okay, so now what else can we look at? The points. There's one that we left behind, which we're going to be talking about now, which is the recoil. How do those two compare? Now, this is where we now start separating the meat from the gravy. The 6.5 Creedmor has got less recoil than the .308 Winchester, and it is quite significant, the difference. On average, you would have a recoil energy of 19.5 on the .308, and you will have a recoil energy of 14 on the 6.5 Creedmor. Okay, that is the highest on both. 14, 19.5. Now, these numbers, they show that it is something to be considered, but it's one of those things that you would actually have to go to the range, shoot a .308 Winchester and shoot a 6.5 Creedmor to be able to understand what do these numbers mean. And it's quite a lot. Okay, that difference is quite significant, to the point where you'll realize, if this is what you've all, let's say this is all you know, 6.308 Winchester, and somebody hands you a 6.5 Creedmor rifle and say, here, shoot this. It's significant. You will be wondering, why have I not been shooting this all along? That's how significant that is. All right, so when it comes to recoil, the 6.5 Creedmor beats the .308 hands down. But like I said, it is one of those factors. It is not all the factors, it is one of them. So now we have to look at one other thing before we make that judgment. Consideration point number 7, barrel longevity. Now once you start putting that into consideration, it can throw a spanner in the works. Okay, so what is known is that the 6.5 Creedmor, because it is shooting a smaller projectile, remember the needle thing? This is where it comes into play now. This right here. All right, you're looking at it there, I'm looking at it on the screen. This is where now the problem starts when it comes to barrel longevity. Remember, the thicker the hole, the bigger the hole inside here. When you push the plunger, 62,000 psi, both, okay, for both the 6.5 and the .308. If you use the same pressure, there is something totally different happening inside here than what is happening inside there. There the pressure is the same, but in here something totally different is happening. Pressure, because the bigger bore, the water just flows out. There isn't that much pressure, okay, and because there isn't that much pressure, it doesn't go further. And we know that because of the projectile effective range, it's shorter on the .308 and longer on the 6.5 Creedmor. Thinner barrel, bore, thinner bore, thinner needle, same amount of pressure, 62,000 psi. You push the plunger, for some reason the water goes further on with the 6.5 Creedmor. What does that mean? It means now that pressure is increased inside this barrel because of what? The thinner bore. Increase in pressure, increase in friction. Now that compromises your barrel longevity. It's physics, right? So now what it has been proved is that the 6.5 Creedmor will wear out the barrel about 50%, 55% faster than the .308 Winchester will. Okay, so let's put that into perspective. If you are able to take 10,000 shots out of a .308 Winchester before the barrel starts showing signs of being worn, you will only be able to take 4,500 shots out of a 6.5 Creedmor before the barrel starts showing signs of being worn out. That is quite significant. So what does that mean? It means if I'm shooting a .308, I will shoot this barrel 10,000 rounds. You are shooting a 6.5 Creedmor at 4,500 shots. You're gonna have to replace that barrel. I'm still shooting a 3.308 Winchester. You replace that barrel, you put in a new one. You shoot another 4,500 shots out of that. It's gonna be worn out. You're gonna have to replace that barrel. Second time, I'm still shooting a .308. I will be left with at least 1,000 more shot out of this barrel before I need to replace it. So when you are on your third barrel with a 6.5 Creedmor, only will I be now considering getting a new barrel for the .308. How much is a barrel? What is the process of replacing a barrel on a rifle? Well, other places maybe it may be easier, but in South Africa, replacing a barrel is the same process as buying a brand new rifle. So you're going to have to consider, should I buy a brand new rifle or pay the cost of going through the gunsmith and through the CFR and doing all these things just to replace that barrel. So when we now start ticking those tick boxes, the .308 Winchester start looking more attractive to me than a 6.5 Creedmor. But when you're living elsewhere, replacing a barrel is just a matter of going to the shop, spending money, paying the gunsmith, replacing the barrel, or doing it yourself if you are able to, and Bob's your uncle. But here, in this country, it's not something that I would be looking at to do. All right. Hence, for me as a new shooter, hence what I would encourage for new shooters is to get yourself a .308. I know now we're going back to the very same video that we talked about, .308. We're still talking about that. It's just that somebody on the comments talked about a 6.5 Creedmor, and also when I posted those cartridges on the site here, the 6.5 Creedmor was there because I knew it is impossible to have an honest conversation about firearms without talking about 6.5 Creedmor. And we talked about the 6.5 Creedmor. And for my purposes, .308 still come out tops. But it's one of those things that you have to consider what is good for you and what is not good for you. I mean, if changing the barrel is not an issue for you, then it's not an issue for you. Then get a 6.5 Creedmor. When it's worn out, change the barrel, you're still good to go. You'll still be beating the .308 when it comes to recoil. I mean, it's quite significant. You'll still be beating .308 Winchester when it comes to reach, when it comes to spots. All right, you'll be reaching further. So if you want to be a professional PRS person, 6.5 Creedmor is your bet. Can you hunt with a 6.5 Creedmor? Sure you can. You can do hunting with a 6.5 Creedmor as much as you can with a .308. You can shoot small, medium, large game. You just have to be mindful of the software that you choose. And it works the same with a .308. You have to be mindful of your software. You can go for small, medium, and large game, no problem. 6.5, no problem. .308, no problem when it comes to hunting. When it comes to sports, you have an advantage with a 6.5 Creedmor than with a .308 because you can reach further and your bullets will be stable mid-air longer than it will be with the .308. So those are the facts to consider. So it now comes back to the individual. It comes back to you. What's good for you? For me, it's the .308, but what's for you? All right. So let's see if I have exhausted all that I wanted to talk about. All right. The barrel wear. yeah, you need to change it. Hey, if that's not your issue, for me it's a breaking point. I can handle every other thing, but this changing of the barrel, no. But if it's not a thing for you, it's not a thing for you, then yeah, because all the cartridges are the same. It is exactly the same thing. 6.5 Creedmor is using the case for the 308. They just change the dimensions, but it's the same. There's no difference there, just smaller, faster, more efficient. All right, so you're gonna have to decide for yourself, but for me the .308 is still the winner. Some people, I totally understand when they say 6.5 Creedmor, it is the best cartridge for them. I totally understand it. You see, with the 30-06 I was give and take, but with the 6.5 Creedmor I totally understand it, because it is an improvement on this. You just have to compromise the changing of the barrel. Everything else is the same. Okay, you gain better recoil. When you take that shot, you can be able to spot your misses or your hits. No problem. You can see your trace, no problem. You can with this, depending on how you set up your system. If this is light, it's gonna be an unwieldy beast, but if it's heavier, you can be able to spot your hits, no problem. All right, so when it comes to these two cartridges, 6.5 Creedmor, .308 Winchester, I feel personally that the matters become just an emotional gibberish. It always boils down to egos and brand loyalty. No facts. I mean, who wants to talk about that? So for me, I would really like to consider the facts before I become emotional about my egos and brand loyalty. Facts speak for themselves. And once the facts are put on the table, it is hard to deny that these cartridges are the best for those people that choose them to be the best. And it is recommended for those who are new shooters. If you are a veteran into shooting, then by all means, if you feel that this is no longer doing it for you, no problem. Who am I to say? But for a new shooter, my recommendation is look into those two cartridges. Look into the .308 and look into the 6.5 Creedmor. They will serve you well. Just consider the differences and if you are able to live with the differences. With that being said, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, don't pull the shot, pull the trigger. Peace out. Okay, that's an impact.